I knew the moment I saw the fluorescent orange envelope tucked under my windshield wiper that my Tuesday was about to go sideways. The sun was barely up over the flat Texas horizon, casting long shadows across the pristine sidewalks of Meadowbrook Estates in suburban Houston, and someone had already found a reason to mess with my day. I pulled the notice free and scanned the printed text, my coffee growing cold in my other hand. Violation notice. Commercial vehicle parked in residential driveway overnight. Section 4.7.2 of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association bylaws strictly prohibits commercial vehicles from being parked in view of the street between the hours of 8 p.m. and 7 a.m. Fine, $150. Repeat violations will result in additional fines and potential legal action. I stared at my white Ford F-250, sitting exactly where I had parked it last night in my own driveway. The truck had my company name on the side in simple black lettering. Sam Olson Electrical Services. Nothing flashy, nothing obscene, just a working man's vehicle that carried the tools of my trade. I had bought this house in Meadowbrook Estates 6 months ago, and this was the first complaint I had received. The irony was not lost on me that at least half the houses in this development had been wired by these very hands, using equipment from this very truck. I crumpled the notice and headed inside to grab my phone. The number for the HOA office was listed at the bottom of the violation. I dialed while finishing my now lukewarm coffee, standing in my garage and looking at the organized chaos of electrical supplies, wire spools, and toolboxes that represented 15 years of building a business from the ground up. Meadowbrook Estates, HOA. This is Patricia speaking. The voice was clipped and professional. Yeah, hi, this is Sam Olson from 4782 Willow Ridge Drive. I just got a violation notice about my work truck, and I need to understand what's going on here. One moment, let me pull up your file. I heard keyboard clicking. Yes, Mr. Olson. The violation was filed by our HOA president, Barbara Sutherland. She conducted a neighborhood inspection yesterday evening and documented several violations throughout the community. Patricia, I'm an electrician. That truck is how I make my living. I've lived here for 6 months and never had an issue. The bylaws are quite clear, Mr. Olson. Commercial vehicles are not permitted to be parked where they are visible from the street during overnight hours. You'll need to park it in your garage or find alternative storage. I glanced at my garage, packed with equipment. My garage is full of supplies for my business. The truck doesn't fit with everything else in there. Then you'll need to make arrangements. The fine stands, and if the violation continues, you'll receive additional fines. You can appeal at the next HOA board meeting on the 15th if you wish to contest it. When did this become such a big deal? There are landscaping trailers and contractor trucks all over this neighborhood. If you notice violations, you're welcome to report them. Have a good day, Mr. Olson. The line went dead. I stood there holding my phone, frustration building in my chest. This was exactly the kind of petty nonsense I had hoped to avoid when I bought a house in a nice, quiet neighborhood. I had grown up in a run-down part of Dallas, where nobody cared what you parked in your yard as long as it ran. Now, I was being fined for parking my livelihood in my own driveway. I had work to do. A new housing development 3 miles away needed rough and electrical work completed before the inspectors arrived on Thursday, and I was already behind schedule because the framers had taken an extra week. I grabbed my tool belt, locked up the house, and climbed into the offending vehicle. The engine turned over with a reliable rumble, and I backed out of my driveway, noticing for the first time the woman standing 3 houses down with her arms crossed, watching me. She was maybe 50, with blonde hair cut in a precise bob and wearing a white tennis outfit despite the fact that it was barely 7 in the morning. Her expression was one of tight-lipped satisfaction, like a cat that had just cornered a mouse. I had seen her around the neighborhood but never spoken to her. She gave me a little wave as I drove past, the kind of wave that felt more like a warning than a greeting. The construction site was organized chaos. Framers were finishing up the last few units, while I and my 2 employees, Marcus and Tommy, worked on running electrical lines through the wooden skeletons of what would eventually be someone's dream home. Marcus had been with me for 8 years, a solid guy from Louisiana who could wire a panel box blindfolded. Tommy was newer, just 2 years in, but eager and learning fast. "Boss, you look like someone kicked your dog," Marcus said when I arrived, already pulling wire through studs. "HOA trouble," I muttered, grabbing my drill and a box of staples. "Got cited for parking my truck in my own driveway." Tommy laughed from inside what would eventually be a master bathroom. "Man, that's why I rent. HOAs are nothing but middle-aged people with too much time and too little to do." "It's not funny," I said, but I was smiling despite myself. "They want me to pay $150 and park somewhere else." "What are you going to do?" Marcus asked. "Going to the board meeting in 2 weeks. Try to talk some sense into them." We worked through the morning, the Texas sun climbing higher and turning the exposed frames into ovens. By lunch, we had knocked out 3 units and were making good time. I sat in my truck with the AC blasting, eating a sandwich and scrolling through the HOA bylaws on my phone. Section 4.7.2 was indeed there, clear as day. Commercial vehicles over 3/4-ton capacity were prohibited from overnight street visible parking. My F-250 technically qualified, though dozens of similar trucks in the neighborhood seemed to get a pass. I noticed something else while reading. Section 6.3 dealt with contractor approval for work performed within the community. Any major work, including electrical, plumbing, or structural modifications, required HOA approval and proper permitting. As the electrician who had wired most of these houses during initial construction, I knew that half the people in Meadowbrook Estates had hired me for under-the-table additions and modifications. A finished basement here, a pool house there, an upgraded panel to support a home theater. All done professionally and to code, but not all reported to the HOA as required. An idea started forming, one I didn't particularly like but kept returning to as the afternoon wore on. By the time I got home that evening, another orange envelope was waiting on my door. This one informed me that my trash bins were visible from the street past the 7 p.m. pickup deadline, a violation of Section 3.2.4. Another $100 fine. I had put the bins out that morning for the next day's pickup, something I had done every week since moving in. I called the HOA office again. This time, a recorded message informed me that office hours were Monday through Thursday, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. It was 6:15 on a Tuesday. That night, I drove through Meadowbrook Estates with a notepad. The development was large, maybe 300 homes spread across 40 acres of former ranch land. Streets named after trees wound through neighborhoods of similar-looking houses, all beige or tan or cream with manicured lawns and strict guidelines about fence heights and mailbox styles. As I drove, I counted 12 landscaping trailers parked on streets or in driveways, 7 pickup trucks similar to or larger than mine, several with company logos, 4 boats parked alongside houses, 2 RVs tucked beside garages, a moving truck parked in a driveway on Oakmont Circle. Nobody seemed to be citing them. I also noted houses where I had done work. The Hendersons on Maple Street, where I had rewired their entire second floor after they converted it into a rental unit. The Patels on Birchwood, where I had installed a subpanel in their detached garage so Mr. Patel could run his woodworking business. The Johnsons, the Craigs, the Delgados. Dozens of jobs over the past 3 years, many of which had never been reported to the HOA because the homeowners wanted to avoid the hassle and fees. I drove past 2847 Sycamore Lane, the largest house in the development. The mailbox had Sutherland in elegant script. Barbara Sutherland, HOA president. The house was a sprawling 2-story with a 3-car garage, professional landscaping, and a brick facade that probably added $50,000 to the build cost. Landscape lights illuminated the front yard like a museum display. I remembered this house because I had been called here 2 years ago, before I lived in the neighborhood. Mrs. Sutherland had wanted additional outlets installed in her kitchen, along with under-cabinet lighting and a dedicated circuit for a new commercial-grade refrigerator. The job had taken 3 days and paid well. She had been polite but particular, insisting everything be perfect. I had pulled the permits properly because it was during new construction, before the house was fully occupied. But I also remembered coming back 6 months later for a smaller job, installing heated floors in her master bathroom. That work had been cash, no permit, no HOA notification. She had specifically requested it that way to avoid the approval process. I drove home with a plan forming, still hoping I wouldn't need to use it. The next morning my truck was untouched. I went to work, came home, parked in the driveway, and went to bed. Thursday morning brought another orange envelope. This one cited me for having a ladder visible on my truck's roof rack, a violation of aesthetic standards. The fine was $200 this time, increased for multiple violations. I had enough. I took the day's afternoon off, leaving Marcus and Tommy to finish the rough-in work, and drove to the county clerk's office in downtown Houston. Public records are wonderful things. For a small processing fee, I could access every permit pulled in the last 5 years for properties in Meadowbrook Estates. I spent 2 hours in a stuffy office, scrolling through digital records and making notes. Then I drove to the city planning office and requested copies of permits for specific addresses. The clerk, a tired-looking woman named Rosa, processed my requests without question. Permits are public record after all. What I found was illuminating. Of the 43 jobs I had personally done in Meadowbrook Estates over the past 4 years, only 19 had corresponding permits on file. The rest were ghost jobs, paid in cash or check, never reported, existing only in my business records and the upgraded electrical systems humming away in people's houses. Some of these jobs were minor, just a few outlets or a ceiling fan, but others were significant. The rental unit. The business garage. A home theater system that drew enough power to run a small factory. A charging station for an electric car that required a dedicated 240-volt line. Every single one of these unpermitted jobs was a violation of HOA rules and, technically, building codes. The work itself was solid, up to code in every way that mattered for safety and function. But the paperwork was missing, which made it a problem for the homeowners if anyone came looking. I went home and drafted an email. I read it 3 times, deleted it, wrote it again, and finally saved it as a draft without sending. The nuclear option. Mutually assured destruction. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who caused trouble for people who had trusted me to do good work. But I also wasn't going to be bullied out of my own driveway by someone who had bent the same rules when it suited her. Friday morning. No envelope. I allowed myself to hope that maybe the harassment had ended. I worked a full day, came home, and found my truck blocked in by a tow truck. A man in a reflective vest was hooking chains to my front axle. "Whoa, whoa, what are you doing?" I shouted, jogging from my front door. HOA called. "Vehicle in violation of community standards. We're towing it to impound." "This is my driveway. You can't tow my truck from my own property." The driver shrugged. "HOA has an enforcement contract with us. They say tow, we tow. You got a problem, take it up with them." "Let me see the authorization." He handed me a form. Sure enough, Barbara Sutherland's signature at the bottom, authorizing the removal of a commercial vehicle in violation of community bylaws. There was legal language about enforcement rights and property standards. My blood was boiling now, a hot rage building in my chest. How much to get it back? I asked through clenched teeth. Towing fee is $300, storage is $50 a day, and there's an administrative fee of $75. You can pick it up tomorrow from the lot on Highway 90. I need this truck for work tomorrow morning. Should have followed your HOA rules. He went back to hooking up the chains. I called the HOA office. No answer. I called the emergency number listed on the website. A recorded message told me to call back during business hours unless this was a life-threatening emergency. I stood in my driveway, watching this man prepare to haul away my livelihood, and made a decision. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. I pulled up the draft I had written, added a few more details, and attached copies of the permit records I had obtained. Then I addressed it to the entire HOA board. Email addresses were listed on the community website, public information for any resident who wanted to contact their representatives. I copied Barbara Sutherland, the 4 other board members, and the property management company that handled day-to-day operations. The subject line read, "Regarding enforcement inconsistencies and permit violations in Meadowbrook Estates." The email was professional but direct. I outlined the situation with my truck and the escalating fines. I noted the numerous other commercial vehicles in the neighborhood that faced no enforcement. Then I dropped the hammer. I listed every unpermitted job I had done in the community, with addresses and approximate dates. I noted that these violations of Section 6.3 carried fines up to $500 per incident, according to the bylaws. I pointed out that selective enforcement of rules was discriminatory and potentially illegal under Texas property law. Finally, I mentioned that Barbara Sutherland's own home contained unpermitted electrical work performed by my company, making her enforcement of rules against me particularly hypocritical. I ended the email with a proposal. Withdraw all fines against me. Allow me to park my truck in my driveway like numerous other residents with commercial vehicles, and we could all move forward peacefully. Otherwise, I would be filing a formal complaint with the county about the unpermitted work and requesting a full inspection audit of every home where I had performed unreported electrical services. I read it one more time, my finger hovering over the send button. The tow truck driver was tightening the chains now, my F-250 lifted partially off the ground. I hit send. "Stop," I told the driver. "You're not taking that truck." "Look, buddy, I don't want trouble, I'm just doing my job." "I get that, but if you take this truck, we're all going to end up in a legal mess. Give me 10 minutes. If I can't resolve this, take it." He looked at his watch. 10 minutes. Then I'm gone with or without it. I called Barbara Sutherland's cell phone. It was listed in the community directory for emergencies. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice irritated. "Mrs. Sutherland, this is Sam Olson from Willow Ridge Drive. You need to call off this tow truck right now." "Mr. Olson, you've had multiple opportunities to comply with community standards. This is the consequence of ignoring HOA regulations." I just sent an email to the entire board. I suggest you read it before this goes any further. There was a pause. I heard keyboard clicking. Then silence. The silence stretched for 30 seconds, a minute. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, lower and more controlled. You're threatening to report residents for permit violations. I'm pointing out that you're selectively enforcing rules. If my truck is a problem, then every unpermitted renovation in this neighborhood is a problem, including the work at your own house. That work was done before I was HOA president, and it was all to code. To code, yes. Permitted and reported to the HOA, no. According to your own bylaws, that's a $500 fine. And it sets a precedent. If you're going to hammer me for parking a truck I use every day to earn a living, then every homeowner who skipped the permit process should face the same scrutiny. Another pause. I could practically hear her thinking, calculating the political fallout. What do you want? Drop the fines. Let me park my truck in my driveway. Stop harassing me for being a working contractor who lives in this neighborhood. That's it. I'm not asking for special treatment, just equal treatment. And if I do that, you'll keep quiet about the permit issues. I have no interest in causing problems for my neighbors, Mrs. Sutherland. I do good work. People trust me, but I also won't be pushed around. I heard muffled conversation, like she was talking to someone else in the room with her hand over the phone. Then she came back. I'll call off the tow. The fines will be reviewed, but you need to understand that rules exist for a reason. This neighborhood has standards. Standards that apparently don't apply equally. Fix that and we won't have any problems. I'll need to discuss this with the board. You do that. In the meantime, call your tow company. She hung up. I watched the driver who was checking his phone. After a moment, his phone rang. He answered, listened, nodded, and started unhooking the chains. Change of plans, I asked. Lady says it was a mistake, that you're working out a payment plan. Not my problem either way. He finished unhooking and climbed back into his truck. Have a good evening. I watched him drive away, my F-250 settling back onto four wheels in my driveway. My hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline fading now that the immediate crisis had passed. I went inside, poured myself a bourbon I rarely touched, and sat on my back patio watching the sun set over the neighborhood. My phone rang an hour later. Unknown number but local area code, I answered. Sam Olson. Mr. Olson, this is David Kramer. I'm on the HOA board with Barbara. I just read your email. Okay. Look, I'm going to be straight with you. What you did was a pretty aggressive move. You threatened a lot of people. I pointed out facts. The threats were implied, sure, but only because I was being targeted unfairly. I hear you. And for what it's worth, I think Barbara went too far. She's been on a crusade lately about property values and neighborhood appearance. It's gotten out of hand. But you have to understand, you just backed the entire board into a corner. We can't be seen caving to threats. So what happens now? We're having an emergency board meeting tomorrow morning. I'm calling to give you a heads up. Barbara wants to fine you for making threats against the community. Some of the other board members are more concerned about the permit violations you mentioned. It's a mess. I didn't threaten anyone. I stated facts about selective enforcement and asked for equal treatment. I know. And I'm on your side, believe it or not. I'm a small business owner too, I get it. But you need to come to this meeting tomorrow and make your case properly. 9 a.m. at the community center. Can you be there? I'll be there. Good, and Sam, maybe bring documentation. If you can prove other vehicles are getting a pass while you're being targeted, it'll help. I've got documentation. Then we'll see you tomorrow. I spent the evening putting together a presentation. Photos of every commercial vehicle in the neighborhood, time stamped and geotagged. copies of my violation notices, a timeline of events, copies of the emails and the permit records, though I printed those and put them in a separate folder marked for reference only. The nuclear option stayed in reserve. Saturday morning was cooler, a front having pushed through overnight. I dressed in business casual, khakis and a button-down shirt, and drove to the Meadowbrook Estates Community Center. It was a single-story building near the neighborhood entrance, with a meeting room, a small gym, and an outdoor pool that saw heavy use in the summer months. The parking lot had a dozen cars. I recognized Barbara Sutherland's white Mercedes immediately, along with several other luxury vehicles. I grabbed my folder and headed inside. The meeting room was set up with a long table at the front where 5 people sat. Barbara Sutherland in the center, looking like she had dressed for a corporate board meeting in a navy suit. To her right was an older man with silver hair, probably 70, wearing a golf shirt. To her left was a middle-aged Hispanic woman taking notes on a laptop. Further down were 2 more people, a younger guy maybe 35 with glasses and a polo shirt, and an older woman with curly red hair. About 20 residents filled the chairs facing the board. I recognized a few of them as people whose homes I had worked on. They wouldn't make eye contact with me. "Let's begin," Barbara said, her voice carrying authority. "This is a special session called to address concerns raised by resident Sam Olson regarding HOA enforcement practices. Mr. Olson, you have 15 minutes to present your case." I stood and walked to the front of the room, trying to project calm confidence even though my stomach was churning. "Thank you for seeing me on short notice. My name is Sam Olson. I live on Willow Ridge Drive, and I'm an electrical contractor. Over the past week, I've received multiple violation notices and fines totaling $450 for parking my work truck in my driveway, having my trash bins visible past pickup time, and having a ladder visible on my truck. Yesterday, an attempt was made to tow my vehicle from my own property. I pulled out the photos. These pictures were taken throughout Meadowbrook Estates over the past few days. They show 12 landscaping trailers, 7 commercial pickup trucks similar to mine, 4 boats, 2 RVs, and a moving truck, all parked in violation of the same bylaws I've been cited for. None of these owners received violations to my knowledge. I passed the photos to the board. Barbara's jaw tightened as she flipped through them. "This is selective enforcement. I'm being targeted while others get a pass. The question is why?" The older man with silver hair leaned forward. "Mr. Olson, I'm Robert Chen, board member. Are you suggesting malice on our part?" "I'm suggesting inconsistency. Whether that's malicious or just lazy enforcement, I don't know, but it's unfair and possibly illegal." The younger guy with glasses spoke up. "I'm David Kramer. We spoke on the phone. The board's position is that we respond to complaints as they're filed. If someone reports a violation, we investigate and enforce. If no one reports it, we don't go looking." "So someone specifically reported me," Barbara cut in. "Violations are noticed during regular inspections. I personally conduct weekly drives through the community to identify issues. And in all these drives, you never notice the 12 trailers and 7 trucks that are identical violations to mine. Mrs. Sutherland, I'm going to ask directly. Do you have a personal problem with me?" Her face flushed slightly. "This isn't personal. You're in violation of clear bylaws. So are dozens of other residents. Yet I'm the only one being fined and facing towing. I'm asking for equal treatment. Either enforce the rules consistently across the entire community or stop enforcing them against me." The Hispanic woman spoke for the first time, her voice measured and professional. "I'm Maria Torres, board secretary. Mr. Olson, What you're asking for would require a massive enforcement effort. We'd have to cite dozens of residents. Or you could acknowledge that the rule is outdated and unevenly enforced, and revise it. Plenty of people in this neighborhood work for a living. We have contractors, landscapers, small business owners. Our vehicles are part of how we make our lives. Penalizing us for that doesn't improve property values. It just makes this place hostile to working people. The older woman with curly red hair nodded slightly. I didn't know who she was, but she seemed sympathetic. Barbara shuffled papers in front of her. Mr. Olson, in your email last night, you made mention of permit violations throughout the community. You specifically listed addresses where you claim work was done without proper HOA approval. That sounds like a threat. Here we go. I kept my voice level. It's not a threat. It's an observation about how rules are enforced selectively. If we're going to be sticklers about bylaws, then all bylaws matter, not just the ones about parking. I've done electrical work on dozens of homes in this community over the past 4 years. Much of that work was excellent, professional, and to code. But not all of it went through your approval process. That's a violation of your own rules. If you want to enforce rules strictly against me, then those homeowners should face the same scrutiny. You're suggesting we audit every home in the neighborhood? Robert Chen asked. I'm suggesting that maybe strict enforcement of every minor rule isn't the way to build a community. But if that's the standard you want to hold me to, then it should apply equally. Barbara leaned back in her chair, studying me. What you did last night was attempt to blackmail this board. What I did was point out hypocrisy. You commissioned unpermitted work at your own home, Mrs. Sutherland. I installed heated bathroom floors for you 18 months ago. Cash payment, no permit, no HOA approval. If I'm being fined for a parked truck, what's the fine for that? The room went silent. Every eye turned to Barbara. Her face had gone from pink to red. That work was minor, she said, her voice tight, and it's irrelevant to this discussion. It's completely relevant. You're enforcing rules you don't follow. That's the definition of hypocrisy. David Kramer cleared his throat. Okay, I think we need to take a step back here. Sam, you've made your point. Barbara, I think we need to acknowledge that enforcement has been inconsistent. The question is, how do we move forward from here? I'll tell you how, Barbara snapped. Mr. Olson needs to comply with the rules like everyone else. If he doesn't like them, he can sell his house and move. The older woman with red hair finally spoke. Barbara, that's not helpful. I'm Susan Wright, Mr. Olson. I've been on this board for 6 years, and I'll be honest, this enforcement campaign has gotten out of hand. We've received more violation notices in the past 2 months than in the previous year. It's creating hostility in the community. We're maintaining standards, Barbara insisted. We're harassing residents, Susan countered. And now we're facing potential legal issues because of selective enforcement. I move that we suspend all fines against Mr. Olson and form a committee to review our enforcement policies. I second that, David said immediately. Barbara looked like she had been slapped. You can't be serious. I am serious. This has gone too far. We need to hit the reset button before we end up in actual court. Robert Chen sighed heavily. I agree. This has become a distraction from real community issues. I support the motion. Maria Torres nodded. As do I. Barbara, I'm sorry, but this isn't the hill to die on. Barbara stared at her fellow board members, her expression a mixture of anger and disbelief. You're all making a mistake. If we let people just ignore the rules whenever they want, this whole community falls apart. Nobody's ignoring the rules, Susan said gently. We're acknowledging that our enforcement has been problematic and we need to fix it. That's good governance. A vote was called. 4-1, the motion passed. My fines were suspended pending a full review of enforcement policies. A committee would be formed to survey residents about which rules mattered most and how enforcement should be handled. I was invited to participate if I wanted. Barbara stood abruptly. "I need some air." She walked out of the meeting room, her heels clicking angrily on the tile floor. The meeting continued for another 20 minutes, covering other community business. I stayed to answer questions from board members and a few residents. Several people thanked me quietly for speaking up. One older gentleman who lived on Oakmont Circle told me he had received 3 violation notices in the past month and was afraid to push back. "You did what a lot of us were too scared to do," he said. "So thank you." I drove home feeling exhausted but relieved. The crisis seemed to have passed. My truck was safe, the fines were dropped, and maybe some actual positive change would come from this mess. I should have known it wouldn't be that simple. Monday morning, I woke to find my mailbox had been knocked over, laying in the grass with the post bent at a harsh angle. It could have been an accident, someone backing out of a driveway carelessly. But the timing felt suspicious. I spent an hour before work cementing it back into place, making it stronger than before. Tuesday, someone reported me to the city for running a business out of my home. An inspector showed up while I was at work, leaving a notice on my door. I had to take time off to meet with him on Wednesday, proving that I didn't operate a storefront or have employees coming and going, that my home was just a residence where I happened to keep supplies in the garage. The inspector was understanding, but it cost me half a day of work. Thursday, I got a letter from the HOA attorney. It was carefully worded, suggesting that my email had contained potentially libelous statements about board members, and that I should refrain from further communications that could be construed as threatening. It wasn't a lawsuit, not yet, but the implication was clear. They were building a case in case this escalated further. I called David Kramer. "What is going on? I thought we resolved this." "Officially, we did. Unofficially, Barbara is furious. She's been on the board for 12 years and nobody has ever challenged her like this. I think she's taking it personally. So she's retaliating. I can't prove that. But yeah, probably. Look, the Enforcement Review Committee is meeting next week. If you can hang on until then, I think we can put some real changes in place that will protect you and others from this kind of harassment. And if I can't hang on, if she keeps coming after me, then you might need to lawyer up. I hate to say it, but this could get uglier before it gets better." I spent that evening researching HOA law in Texas. It's a complicated mess of property rights, contract law, and community governance. HOAs have broad powers, but those powers aren't unlimited. Selective enforcement is a valid legal defense. Harassment can be grounds for a lawsuit. But litigation is expensive and time-consuming, and I had a business to run. The following Monday, the Enforcement Review Committee met. It consisted of David Kramer, Susan Wright, 3 residents who had volunteered, and me. Barbara had recused herself, claiming a conflict of interest. We met in the evening at the community center, armed with coffee and printouts of the current bylaws. "Let's start with the big picture," David said. "We have a 60-page bylaws document that nobody reads. Half these rules are outdated or irrelevant. We need to figure out what actually matters to residents and what's just bureaucratic bloat." Susan pulled up a survey that had been sent to all residents. We got 143 responses out of 300 households. Top concerns are property maintenance, noise complaints, and parking. But when we asked specifically about commercial vehicles, 68% of respondents said they didn't care as long as the vehicles were maintained and not an eyesore. One of the resident volunteers, a woman named Jennifer who lived near me, spoke up. I think the original rule made sense when the neighborhood was new. You don't want a bunch of beat-up work trucks making the place look like a construction zone. But now we're established. People know what they bought into. And frankly, I'd rather have Sam's clean work truck next door than some of the rust buckets I see around here that aren't commercial. We spent 2 hours hammering out proposals. The consensus was that commercial vehicles should be allowed if they were properly maintained, didn't have obscene or offensive graphics, and weren't oversized. A truck like mine would be fine. A semi-truck or a vehicle with major body damage would not. It was a reasonable middle ground. We also proposed changes to the enforcement process. Violations should come with a warning first, except in cases of serious safety issues. Fines should be standardized and documented. Any resident receiving a violation should have the right to appeal before fines were assessed. And critically, enforcement should be uniform. If someone was cited for a violation, the HOA had to demonstrate they were enforcing that rule consistently across the community. The proposals would go to the full board for a vote at the next regular meeting, scheduled for 2 weeks out. In the meantime, I kept my head down and focused on work. The rough-in job was completed and passed inspection. I picked up a new project, rewiring a commercial building in downtown Houston, a 6-week job that would keep me and my guys busy and well paid. But the tension in Meadowbrook Estates remained. I could feel it when I drove through the neighborhood, a watchfulness from certain houses. Barbara Sutherland's Mercedes never seemed to be parked in her driveway anymore when I drove past, but I saw her once at the grocery store. She looked right through me like I didn't exist. The night before the board meeting, David called me again. Heads up. Barbara is planning to propose a special assessment for hiring additional security patrols. She's framing it as a safety measure, but I think it's really about increasing enforcement presence. She's not going down without a fight. Can she do that? Special assessments require a majority board vote and resident approval if they exceed a certain amount. It's a long shot, but she's got Robert Chen on her side. If she can swing Maria, it could pass the board. Then it goes to a resident vote. This is insane. Why is she so fixated on this? Pride, I think, and control. Barbara ran this HOA like her personal fiefdom for years. You challenged that. She can't let it go. The board meeting was packed. Word had gotten around that major changes were being proposed, and people showed up to have their say. The meeting room was standing room only, at least 60 residents crammed into a space meant for 40. Barbara called the meeting to order with her usual crisp efficiency. Regular business was handled first, approvals of landscaping budgets and pool maintenance contracts. Then we got to the main event. David presented the Enforcement Review Committee's proposals. He walked through each change methodically, explaining the reasoning and the resident feedback that supported them. He was articulate and persuasive, and I could see heads nodding throughout the room. When he finished, Barbara spoke. These proposals essentially gut our ability to maintain community standards. If we allow commercial vehicles without restrictions, what's next? RVs, boats, trailers full of equipment. We bought into this community because it has standards. Lowering those standards hurts everyone's property values. Susan Wright countered. Barbara, the standards aren't being lowered. They're being made reasonable and enforceable. What hurt the community was arbitrary enforcement that made people feel attacked in their own homes. I moved to table these proposals pending further review, Barbara said. I moved to adopt them as presented, Susan replied immediately. A vote was called. David, Susan, and Maria voted yes. Barbara and Robert voted no. 3-2, the proposals passed. Barbara's face was stony. Fine. Then I have a proposal of my own. Given the committee's findings that enforcement has been inconsistent, I move that we hire a professional property management company to handle all enforcement actions. This removes personality from the equation and ensures rules are applied uniformly. It was actually not a bad idea in principle. Professional management could bring consistency, but I smelled a trap. David clearly did too. Which company are you proposing? Prestige Property Management. They specialize in HOA enforcement and have an excellent reputation. Maria looked up from her laptop. They also have a reputation for aggressive enforcement and high fees. I looked into them last year when we were considering management changes. Their average citation rate is 3 times higher than the industry standard. Because they're thorough, Barbara insisted. Isn't that what we want? Consistency and thoroughness. We want fairness, Susan said. Not a police state. The debate went on for 20 minutes. Eventually, a compromise was reached. The board would solicit proposals from 3 different management companies and review them at the next meeting. No decision would be made immediately. As the meeting wrapped up, a resident I didn't recognize stood up. I have a question for Mrs. Sutherland. Is it true you had unpermitted electrical work done at your home? The room went silent. Barbara's face flushed. That's a personal matter and not relevant to this meeting. It is relevant, the resident pressed. If board members aren't following the rules they enforce, that's a problem. Did you or did you not have work done without getting HOA approval? The work was completed before current permit requirements were in place, Barbara said, which was a lie. The requirements had been in the bylaws for 5 years. I stayed quiet, but Susan Wright didn't. Barbara, that's not accurate. The permit requirements in Section 6.3 have been in place since 2019. If you had work done after that date without approval, that's a violation. Barbara gathered her papers, her movements sharp and angry. This meeting is adjourned. She walked out without another word. The room erupted in conversation. People were angry, confused, looking for answers. David tried to restore order, but it was clear the authority of the board had taken a serious hit. I slipped out and headed home, feeling like I had won the battle but might still lose the war. Over the next week, things in the neighborhood shifted. The proposed enforcement changes were posted on the community website, and reaction was mixed. Some people were thrilled, feeling like common sense had prevailed. Others worried that standards would slip and property values would decline. A few angry emails circulated, accusing me of bullying the board and trying to turn Meadowbrook Estates into a trailer park. But most people just seemed relieved that the aggressive enforcement would stop. I got thanked at the gas station, waved at by people I didn't know, even had a neighbor bring over a 6-pack of beer as a gesture of gratitude. My husband is a plumber, she explained. He got cited for his van last month and was furious. What you did helped all of us. Barbara Sutherland, meanwhile, seemed to be everywhere and nowhere. Her Mercedes was gone from her driveway more often than not. Rumors started circulating that she was talking about resigning from the board. David told me she had stopped responding to board emails and had missed 2 committee meetings. Then, 2 weeks after the contentious board meeting, everything came to a head in a way I never expected. I was working on the commercial downtown project when I got a call from Marcus. "Boss, you need to see this. Someone posted something on the community Facebook page and it's blowing up." I took my lunch break to check social media. The Meadowbrook Estates community group had over 400 members, and the top post was from Barbara Sutherland. After much consideration and prayer, I'm resigning from the HOA board effective immediately. For 12 years, I've dedicated myself to this community, working to maintain the standards and values that make Meadowbrook Estates a desirable place to live. Recently, I've faced personal attacks and false accusations from residents who seem more interested in tearing down than building up. I will not be bullied or harassed any further. I wish the community well, but I can no longer serve in this hostile environment. The comments section was chaos. Some people thanked her for her service and condemned the bullies who drove her out. Others celebrated her departure. A few tried to play peacemaker, suggesting everyone calm down. I didn't comment. I didn't need to add fuel to that fire. But an hour later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Mr. Olson, this is Margaret Chen, Robert's wife. We met briefly at the board meeting." "Yes, madam. How can I help you? I'm calling because I think you should know something." Barbara didn't resign because of the board issues. Well, not entirely. There's more to the story. I'm not sure I should be hearing this. Please, just listen. Robert told me in confidence, but I think people deserve to know the truth. Barbara has been embezzling money from the HOA. I nearly dropped my phone. What? Small amounts over several years. Robert discovered it while reviewing the books after the enforcement controversy started. He was looking for documentation about violation fines, trying to verify records, and he found discrepancies. Payments to vendors that don't exist. Reimbursements for expenses that were never actually incurred. It adds up to almost $40,000 over 3 years. Did he report this? He confronted Barbara privately, gave her a choice. Resign and pay the money back quietly, or he'd take it to the police. She chose to resign. She's supposed to be working out a repayment plan with the board attorney. Why are you telling me this? Because people are blaming you for driving her out. They think you bullied a dedicated volunteer. But the truth is, she was caught stealing and you had nothing to do with her resignation. You deserve to know that. Mrs. Chen, I appreciate you calling, but if this is true, it shouldn't be covered up. The community has a right to know. Robert disagrees. He thinks it would be too disruptive, that it would damage the community's reputation. It's going to come out eventually. These things always do, she sighed. I know. That's why I'm telling you. Maybe if enough people know the truth, Robert will do the right thing and make it public properly. We talked for a few more minutes, and she gave me more details. Barbara had used her position as president to approve payments to shell companies she controlled. Lawn maintenance that never happened. Painting contracts that were never fulfilled. It was clever and small-scale enough to avoid immediate detection, but over time it added up. After the call ended, I sat in my truck trying to decide what to do. This was bigger than parking violations and enforcement policies. This was actual crime. If Robert was letting her just resign and pay it back, that felt like a cover-up. I called David Kramer. We need to talk. In person. We met that evening at a coffee shop outside the neighborhood. I told him what Margaret Chen had shared. He listened with growing concern. I didn't know, he said finally. Robert didn't say anything to the board, because he's trying to handle it quietly. But that's not right. If she stole from the HOA, she stole from everyone who pays dues. People have a right to know. If we make this public, it's going to be a nightmare. Police investigation, potential lawsuits, the whole thing. It's going to be a nightmare either way. But at least if it's handled properly, justice gets done. David rubbed his face, looking exhausted. Okay, I'll talk to Susan and Maria. If the three of us demand a full audit and disclosure, Robert won't be able to keep it quiet. But Sam, this is going to explode. The community is already divided. This will make it worse. The community is divided because of lies and manipulation. Truth might hurt, but it's better than the alternative. The next board meeting was scheduled for 3 days later. David, Susan, and Maria called an executive session before the public meeting. I wasn't present for that conversation, but David filled me in afterward. Robert had been furious that the embezzlement had leaked. He insisted they could handle it internally, avoid scandal and legal fees. But the three of them outvoted him. They demanded a full forensic audit of HOA finances going back 5 years, and insisted that the findings be reported to the membership and, if necessary, to law enforcement. At the public meeting, with another packed room of residents, David made the announcement. The board has become aware of financial irregularities in HOA accounts. We're conducting a full audit to determine the extent of the issue. Barbara Sutherland's resignation is related to these irregularities. We will provide updates as the audit progresses, and we will take appropriate action based on the findings. The room erupted in questions. David handled them as best he could without revealing details, but the cat was out of the bag. By the next morning, the neighborhood Facebook group was ablaze with speculation and accusations. The forensic audit took 3 weeks and cost the HOA $12,000. But the results were damning. Barbara had stolen $38,400 over a period of 32 months. The auditors found evidence of falsified invoices, unauthorized reimbursements, and improper payments to companies she controlled. The board voted unanimously to refer the matter to the Harris County District Attorney's Office. Criminal charges were filed. Barbara Sutherland was arrested on charges of theft by a public servant and fraud. The story made the local news. A brief segment about HOA corruption that featured uncomfortable interviews with residents and shots of the Meadowbrook Estates sign. I watched the news coverage from my living room, my work truck parked proudly in the driveway outside. There was no satisfaction in it, just a tired sense of resolution. I hadn't set out to destroy anyone. I just wanted to park my truck at my own house. The legal process ground forward slowly. Barbara hired a defense attorney and tried to argue that the payments were legitimate, but the paper trail was too clear. Faced with overwhelming evidence, she eventually accepted a plea deal. She pled guilty to felony theft, was sentenced to 2 years of probation, ordered to pay full restitution plus penalties, and banned from serving on any HOA board in Texas. The community had to deal with the aftermath. A special election was held to fill Barbara's seat on the board. Dues were temporarily increased to cover the cost of the audit and legal fees. Some residents were angry at the disruption. Others felt vindicated that corruption had been uncovered and dealt with. For me, life slowly returned to normal. The new enforcement policies went into effect. My truck stayed in my driveway, along with several other commercial vehicles throughout the neighborhood. Nobody complained. The violation notices stopped. The harassment ended. I ran into Robert Chen one morning at the neighborhood gym. He was on a treadmill when I arrived. We made eye contact, and after a moment's hesitation, I walked over. "Mr. Chen." "Sam." He slowed the treadmill to a walk. "I suppose you think you were right about all this." "I think I wanted to park my truck at my house. Everything else just happened. You could have left it alone. Let me handle Barbara privately. Instead, you turned it into a circus." "With respect, sir, you weren't handling it. You were covering it up. There's a difference." He stopped the treadmill entirely and stepped off, grabbing a towel. "She was stealing, yes. But she also did good things for this community for years. She didn't deserve to be publicly humiliated and prosecuted. She stole from 300 families. That's not a mistake or a lapse in judgment. It's a crime, and crimes have consequences." He studied me for a long moment. "You're not wrong. I just wish there had been another way." "Me too." He walked away, and I never had another conversation with him. He resigned from the board 2 months later and moved out of the neighborhood shortly after that. David Kramer became the new HOA president. Susan Wright became vice president. They brought in 2 new board members through the special election, both of whom were younger and more focused on community building than rule enforcement. The whole tone of the HOA changed. They organized neighborhood barbecues and movie nights. They created a community garden and a little lending library near the entrance. They streamlined the bylaws down to 15 pages, focused on actual important issues like property maintenance, noise, and safety. The transformation was remarkable. I ended up joining the Architectural Review Committee, using my construction knowledge to help residents plan renovations and navigate permit requirements. It was voluntary and took up a few hours a month, but it felt good to contribute positively after all the conflict. Marcus and Tommy thought the whole thing was hilarious. "Boss becomes HOA enforcer," Tommy joked. "What's next? You running for president?" "Not a chance," I said. "I'll help out, but I'm not getting that deep into it." One evening about 6 months after everything had settled, I was sitting on my front porch when a car pulled up. A young couple got out, looking around the neighborhood with the wide-eyed enthusiasm of first-time homebuyers. They spotted me and walked over. "Hi, sorry to bother you," the man said. "We're thinking about buying a house in this neighborhood. Can I ask, what's the HOA like? We've heard some neighborhoods can be really strict." I smiled. "It's good now. Reasonable rules, fair enforcement. They focus on the important stuff and leave people alone about the small things. As long as you're not throwing loud parties at 2 a.m. or letting your property fall apart, you'll be fine." "That's great to hear," the woman said. "We were worried because we both work from home and have company vehicles." "You'll be fine," I assured them. They've got clear policies about commercial vehicles now. As long as it's maintained and not something crazy, nobody cares. They thanked me and moved on, continuing their tour of the neighborhood. I watched them go, thinking about how far things had come. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Hey, we're having a board planning session next week to talk about next year's budget. Can you sit in? Would be good to have a contractor perspective on maintenance priorities." I typed back a quick yes and set the phone down. The sun was setting over Meadowbrook Estates, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. My F-250 sat in the driveway, tools inside ready for tomorrow's job. The neighborhood was quiet, families having dinner, kids playing in backyards, the normal sounds of people living their lives. It occurred to me that this was what community was supposed to be. Not rules for the sake of rules, not power trips and petty enforcement, but people finding a way to live together with mutual respect. It had taken a fight to get here, a fight I never wanted but didn't back down from. And in the end, the truth had won out. I thought about Barbara sometimes, wondered if she regretted her choices. The theft, obviously, but also the way she had approached governing the HOA. If she had treated people with respect, if she had enforced rules fairly, if she had been honest, none of the rest would have happened. Her own corruption had been revealed because she had made enemies by being petty and vindictive. There was a lesson in that, though I wasn't sure Barbara would ever learn it. My neighbor 2 houses down, a guy named Mike who worked in IT, walked past with his dog. He waved. "Hey Sam, you going to the community barbecue on Saturday?" "Planning on it." "Good. Susan's making her famous brisket. Don't miss it." He continued down the sidewalk, his golden retriever sniffing at every mailbox. I finished my beer and headed inside. Tomorrow was another work day, another set of houses to wire, another group of people depending on my skills to keep their lights on and their homes functional. It was honest work, work I was proud of. And now I could do it without worrying about coming home to orange violation notices and tow trucks. As I locked up for the night, I noticed the community newsletter in my mailbox. The new board published it monthly now, full of updates and event announcements and neighbor profiles. This month's issue had a feature article about local businesses operated by residents, highlighting the entrepreneurs and tradespeople who called Meadowbrook Estates home. My company was mentioned, along with a plumber, a landscaper, a graphic designer, and a woman who ran a successful catering business out of her house. The article celebrated the diversity of the community and encouraged residents to support local businesses. It was a far cry from violation notices and embezzlement scandals. I smiled and tossed the newsletter on my kitchen counter, making a mental note to thank David for the positive coverage. Then I poured myself a glass of water and stood at my kitchen window, looking out at the neighborhood I had fought to stay part of. It had been worth it. Every frustrating email, every tense meeting, every moment of doubt. I had stood up for what was right, and while the journey had been messy and uncomfortable, the destination was good. My phone rang one more time before bed. It was a new client, someone looking for a whole house rewire in the neighboring community of Pinecrest. We talked for 20 minutes about their needs and timeline. I scheduled an estimate for later in the week and added them to my project calendar. Business was good. Life was good. The HOA drama was behind me. As I finally headed to bed that night, I passed by my home office where I kept my business records and project files. Sitting on the desk was a framed license, my Texas electrical contractor certification that I had worked years to earn. Next to it was a photo of my crew, Marcus and Tommy and me, standing in front of a completed project, tired and dirty and proud. This was who I was. A working man, a skilled tradesman, someone who built things and fixed things and helped people. No HOA board or petty bureaucrat was going to change that or make me feel ashamed of it. I turned off the lights and climbed into bed, already thinking about tomorrow's work. There was a panel upgrade in the morning and a service call in the afternoon. Just another Tuesday in the life of an electrician who had accidentally taken down a corrupt HOA president and reformed a neighborhood association. Not bad for a guy who just wanted to park his truck in his own driveway. The last thing I thought before falling asleep was that I should probably write a review of Meadowbrook Estates for those house hunting websites. 5 stars for the new management, great neighbors, reasonable rules. Just don't try to mess with the electrician who wires everyone's homes. He's got documentation and he's not afraid to use it. I smiled in the darkness and drifted off, the sound of the neighborhood settling in for the night all around me. Home. Finally, truly home.